let's just start off with a little bit of a summary of the parasha. I'll share my screen. So these two portions, but Lech Lecha and VaYeira, they obviously go together. They're relating the entire story of Abraham coming to Eretz Yisrael. So I'll just read through this. God reveals himself to Avraham, Avraham, we learned this last week, don't say Avraham, Abraham, 3 days after the first Jewish circumcision at age 99. But Abraham rushes off to prepare a meal for the 3 guests who appear in the desert heat. This is the famous story. So he's sitting there and Hashem's speaking to him, and he gets up and leaves that encounter to go and take care of the 3 guests. One of the three who are angels disguised as men announces that in exactly 1 year, the barren Sarah will give birth to a son, but Sarah laughs. And that's going to come back later on. So Avram pleads with God to spare the wicked city of Sodom. 2 of the 3 disguised angels arrive in the doomed city where Abraham's nephew Lot extends the hospitality to them and protects them from the evil intentions of a sodomite mob. The 2 guests reveal that they have come to overturn the place and to save Lot and his family. Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt when she disobeys the command not to look back at the burning city as they flee. While taking shelter in a cave, Lot's 2 daughters, believing that they and their father are the only survivors left in the world, so they get their father drunk, they lay with him and become pregnant. The 2 sons born from this incident father the nations of Moab and Ammon, who appear later on in the Chumash and the journeys of the Jewish people going through before coming to the land of Israel. Avraham then moves to Gerar, another migration, where the Philistine king Avimelech takes Sarah, a repeat of what we saw last week, who is presented as Abraham's sister, to his palace. In a dream, God warns Avimelech that he will die unless he returns the woman to her husband. Abraham explains that he feared he would be killed over the beautiful Sarah. God then remembers his promise to Sarah and gives her and Abraham a son who is named Yitzchak. And Yitzchak means to laugh, reminiscent of when she laughed, when Sarah laughed. There's a whole fascinating discussion about that, a deeper meaning of the meaning of the word and why he's named laughter. Yitzchak is circumcised at the age of 8 days. Avram is 100 years and Sarah 90 at their child's birth. Hagar and Yishmael are abandoned. And Hagar again is the co-wife or the other wife of Avram, and she had a child before Yitzchak was born, Yishmael, and they're now banished from Abraham's home and wander in the desert. God hears the cry of the dying lad and saves his life by showing his mother a well. Avimelech makes a treaty with Avraham at Beersheba, where Avraham gives him 7 sheep as a sign of their truce. And as you can see with all these things, these are all significant episodes which deserve all their own analysis. But finally, in last Aliyah, Hashem tests Abraham's devotion by commanding him to sacrifice Yitzchak on Mount Moriah, which is Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Yitzchak is bound and placed on the altar, and Abraham raises the knife to slaughter his son, but a voice from heaven calls out to stop him. A ram caught in the undergrowth by its horns is offered in Yitzchak's place, and Avram receives the news of the birth of a daughter, Rivka, to his nephew Besuel, and then the next parsha follows after. So that's just an overview of the portions, just to give you the context of what's going on. Anyway, so the big theme, the big topic of the portion this week is the 10 tests of Avram. Some of the tests began, the trials, the famous 10 trials of Avram Avinu. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos that he was tested with 10 trials, and he withstood all those trials, and he displayed his faith in Hashem despite the trials he went through. And the 10 trials, just for the record, what are the 10 trials? There's actually a few different opinions on it exactly. Many of them are the same, but there's a few discrepancies of what some of them are. But I'm going to read to you what they are called, the Bartanura, the famous commentary on the Mishnah, and he says that the 10 trials are as follows. Number 1, he's thrown into a fiery furnace. Now, some of these trials are not explicitly mentioned in the Chumash, but the first one is not. He's thrown into a fiery furnace. This is back when he was still becoming the proponent and the spokesman of monotheism. and he's challenged by Nimrod. We spoke about that a few weeks ago. Challenged by Nimrod, and Nimrod threatens his life. He says, "Listen, I'm going to throw you in the furnace. If you don't renounce your belief in the one God." And he said, "Do what you want with me. Throw me in the furnace." And he's thrown in the furnace in a statement of his commitment to monotheism, belief in Hashem, and that's the first trial he went through. Second trial he went through, God tells him to leave his homeland, to be a stranger in the land of Canaan. That was certainly just as he's arriving. I'm sorry, this is before he's leaving his homeland, traveling 400 miles approximately to come to Eretz Canaan. That's a big trial. Number 3, immediately after his arrival in the promised land, he encounters a famine. And then number 4, the Egyptian sees his beloved wife Sarah and bring her to Pharaoh. 5, he faces incredible odds in the battle of the 4 and 5 kings. That's in this week's portion. Number 6, he is told by God that his children will be strangers in a strange land. Number 7, God tells him to circumcise himself at an advanced age. Number 8, the king of Gerar captures Sarah, intending to take her for himself. Number 9, God tells him to send away Hagar and her son Yishmael. And number 10 is this test called the Akedas Yitzchak, the ultimate test, as is described, as he's being told by Hashem to sacrifice Yitzchak, the very progeny, the one who Hashem had earlier said that this is in whom your legacy is going to be continued on through. I want you to now sacrifice him. And that's called Akedas Yitzchak, the sacrifice, the binding of Isaac. And he wholeheartedly, with commitment, he gets up and he goes and he performs, or he's about to perform the Akedah, the binding and the sacrifice of Yitzchak, until eventually an angel tells him, "Stop it, don't do it." And because by the effort to do it, the desire to do it, the willingness to do it, he already displayed his passing of the test to be able to do it, to serve Hashem in such a wholehearted way. And then he was told not to sacrifice him, and the story goes on. So this is, we mentioned the Akedas Yitzchak, Rosh Hashanah. It's mentioned in the davening of Rosh Hashanah. So it's a very significant, a very highlighted aspect of the story of Abraham. And it really is it sums up the entire concept of trials and tribulation, trials that people go through in their lives. And the Zion, when we look at different portions of the Torah, I mentioned this before, every portion has a particular theme and a highlighted theme which we have to focus on. There's no question that these 2 portions, and certainly VaYeira, is teaching us something about how to deal with challenges, or not challenges, how to deal with trials, the trials that Hashem sends to us. What is the attitude? What is the right approach to dealing with the trial? Because Abraham is the passer of trials par excellence. So what I want to do is dive into one comment on this episode of the Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. But as a preface to looking at this commentary, the Sephorno is the commentary which I want to look at. He's a very famous, I think, 12th or 13th century Sephardic commentary from Spain, very famous. But before I read to you what he says, first I'll tell you a different story, a story of something which happened this morning. So it happens to be my other son came with his wife as well, and they have a story to tell as well about their quarantine, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So they're here in Jerusalem as well, and they were eating breakfast in the street, on a cafe in a street below where my apartment is. And my son calls me. He says, come down to the cafe because my friend Joseph is here with us, and he has a friend, an Israeli friend Joseph, who came to meet with them. So I go downstairs and I'm talking to Joseph. I remember him, he was in America a few years ago. So we're talking, and he tells me that he works for a startup company right now, and he's kind of business, very hardworking guy. And he told me that he's decided to become a doctor. And why is he becoming a doctor? Because he had an experience of a Yom Kippur. He was in the hospital with his brother, who was in the hospital. And while he was in the hospital, taking care of his brother over Yom Kippur, he realized, he was watching all these doctors and the nurses, and he was so inspired by the chesed that they were all doing. Just, this is a life of chesed, helping people. And he realized, I don't want to spend the rest of my life only just doing business and making money. I want to feel like I'm doing something. I want to give something to people. And he says to me, I want to emulate Hashem. Hashem does chesed. And isn't this what life is about emulating Hashem? So I want to do chesed. I want to help people. And he's decided, very smart guy. He's 27 years old. And he's going to medical school. He's going to become a doctor, right? Because he wants to devote his life to helping people, emulating Hashem. Those were his words. So I said, it's tremendous, beautiful. I said, it's very, Hashem should give you a lot of bracha, success in what you're doing. So I leave, I come back upstairs to my apartment and I sit down to eat my breakfast myself. And I'm sitting down. I didn't eat the cafe today, but whatever. So I'm sitting eating breakfast in my apartment, and I open up a chumash, and I'm looking at the chumash on this pasuk about where it begins. It was after these matters that Hashem tested Avraham, and He said to him, Avraham, and Avraham said, Hineni, here I am. So the Seforno, listen to what the Seforno says. The Seforno, that commentary, the Spanish commentary, he says, Kivan she. I'll read it in English. He said, Seforno writes the following: to demonstrate that Abraham's love for God, as well as his fear of God, was not merely potential, but actual, much as God's goodness is not merely potential, but actual. In other words, the purpose of this test was to bring out not just the potential commitment that Abraham had, but bring it out into actuality. In other words, we have a lot of aspirations inside of ourselves, a lot of desires, a lot of good thoughts, but to bring it out into potential, bring that into actuality, is the real test of life, to convert the potential into the actual. And as I'm reading this, I'm reflecting back upon this conversation I just had with this Joseph. And in fact, my daughter-in-law said to him in that conversation, she said, it's very nice, but why don't you just, why do you have to dedicate your entire life to doing chesed? Why can't you just, in the small ways, do chesed as well? She says, no, I don't want to just leave it latent inside of me. I want to bring it out in the fullest sense of the word. And I'm reading the Sephort over here, and it's echoing exactly what this guy Joseph was saying, that the test of Abraham was to bring out his commitment, not just from the potential, but to the actual, to be like God, to be like Hashem. Just as Hashem is not in potential, but is in actual, to bring it out also, continues. He says, the purpose of man's existence is to emulate the virtues of God. And by means of this test, Abraham had an opportunity to demonstrate this, to demonstrate that his commitment wasn't just latent potential, but it was in the actual as well. When God created man, he had set himself the objective of let us make man in our image. We're supposed to be like Hashem, as much like divine beings as it's possible for a creature to be. So the purpose of this test was to bring it out, and not just to be there in the potential and theory and thought and feeling, but to make it a living reality. And that's the purpose of this test. And that's the purpose of every trial, to convert that which I feel inside of myself into a living reality, into living expression. So I thought, what a beautiful segue from this conversation from Joseph into the Sephorno and this pasuk. But then I started thinking to myself, it's a funny thing. I understand the concept, converting the potential into the actual. But what type of potential and actual are we talking about over here? We're talking about emulating Hashem as well, converting. He's not just theoretically good, but in actuality, he's good. But what type of good is being done over here? Sacrificing a child? Where's the emulation of Hashem in that? Why is that called emulating Hashem? That true, he's demonstrating something, but demonstrating the willingness to sacrifice a child. We think about Hashem as being all giving and all kind, and chesed and merciful. So if we're focusing right now upon emulating Hashem's ways, it seems like the sacrificing of a child is the exact antithesis of emulating Hashem's ways. So that's what I was thinking about as I read this Sephorah, until I thought to myself, no, because what does it mean? Who is Hashem? Who is Hashem? What does it mean to be Hashem? What is Hashem? Hashem is Hashem. Hashem is the creator of the universe, obviously. Hashem is the manig, is the one who governs everything. But if we have to describe, we would have to talk about Hashem in one respect. We could say that Hashem is perfect, obviously, perfect, emes, put into more of a relatable language. Everything which he does is measured, is calculated, is thought out. The midah of Hashem, everything which Hashem does in the universe, what we know of Hashem is everything is precisely, perfectly calculated and measured. Everything is perfect, everything is emes. In other words, there is no reactive behavior by Hashem. Hashem doesn't just spontaneously get angry. Hashem doesn't spontaneously do things. The picture, the persona of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is calculation, measured, wisdom, defined, calculated. Everything is measured and calculated. The opposite of reactive stimulation. That's what it means to emulate Hashem. When we want to emulate Hashem, we're trying to become more in control of everything about ourselves, in control of our emotions, in control of our desires. So sometimes being in control of our desires may even require withholding a chesed, withholding a kindness, if that's what's called for in that given moment. It's not always the case that chesed and kindness and mercy is the action, the behavior which is called for. It depends if it's in the realm of truth. Emulating Hashem is thinking about everything which we do and thinking, is this the right thing to do at this particular juncture in time? So in Abraham, Avraham Avinu is being tested over here. It's true, he's being tested in an activity which seems to go against the nature of kindness and mercy. But that's precisely the test. Are you willing to suspend your natural impulse, your natural stimulus, for the sake of doing that which is called for, given the fact that Hashem has indeed asked him to do this? So even in the most extreme circumstance of taking the life of a child, can't even imagine this, but this is for Abraham, he did it. But it at least gives us an example of how we can get closer to an ideal of suspending our immediate reactions to stimuli, whether they be emotional or physical stimuli, to do that which Hashem expects of us. That's what it means, converting our potential into the actual, that we actually live this way as well. It's interesting that the beginning of the portion, we didn't spend time on this, but the beginning of the portion tells the story of the guests who come to visit Abraham after the 3 days after the circumcision. And mentioned briefly before, the Medrash says that he was in the midst of having actually an encounter, a spiritual encounter with Hashem. Hashem was speaking to him at that moment. He was in devekus, in attachment to Hashem. Hashem was speaking to him. And what does the Medrash say he does? The pasuk says he gets up and he leaves that encounter to go ahead and take care of these guests. And the question is, like, you compare the two activities, that the experience of talking to Hashem compared to taking care of three, travelers. There's no comparison. Taking care of three travelers surely pales in comparison to the sublime experience of talking to Hashem, but he suspends that. And it's again another example of not sacrificing his son, but self-sacrifice of that which is maybe emotionally, spiritually uplifting for myself, and to suspend that and to suspend that for the sake of doing the Ratzon of Hashem. It's a powerful message. How many people would suspend their sublime spiritual experience for the sake of doing something which doesn't have such pleasure or sensational experience to it? Taking care of some smelly people as guests, but that's what it was called for, because that's called emulating Hashem. Taking care of the guests, that's called emulating Hashem, and that's what was called for, even to the extent of suspending one's spiritual experience. So whether it be suspending the spiritual experience of the very devekus connection to Hashem in that first episode, or suspending the emotional connection to one's child in that later portion of the Akedah, if that's what's called for, that's what's called for. And he was prepared to do it. He was prepared to do it. And that's what a trial is. A trial is putting on hold the immediate physical, emotional stimuli to do that which is called for, what is necessary in this moment right now, to do that which is what my responsibility is, and not reacting to my stimuli, my immediate stimuli. That's what passing a test really is all about. But it goes one step further. The Slonim Rebbe, one of my favorite sources, he says, if you look at the pasuk says, after these things, it says, Elokim nisa es Avraham. God tested Abraham. Now we know there are many names for Hashem. There's the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud Hey and Vav Hey name of Hashem. And then there's the Elokim name of Hashem. What's one of the differences between these two different names? The Elokim name actually refers to justice, and it also in Kabbalah is reminiscent of what's called tzimtzum, constriction. The name Elokim relates more to the constricted manifestation of God in the world. Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei is reminiscent of the outpouring of flow of chesed and love and kindness and mercy from Hashem. Elokim reminds us more of the constricted, disciplined approach that God has with the world. It's a more constricted, and so the name Elokim is used where the atmosphere is more restricted, where the experience of the recipient is more of restriction and constriction. One is not seeing, one is not necessarily being fully connected to the full merciful state of trait of Hashem. It's like almost like I know God is there, but I'm not feeling that touchy-feely experience of this outpouring of love and connection. It's more of a disciplined justice style presence of Hashem. And that's the name of Hashem, which is used over here. Why is that? So the Shlomo Rebbe says, because he said trials in life, the real trials in life happen to us when we're feeling constricted. You see, if you're feeling excited and all full of joy and happiness and feeling good, then things are not really so much of a trial. Whatever you have to do is easy to do. What you have to do is much harder when you don't feel like doing it. That's what makes it into a trial. So the true test of a person, whether a person's love for God, love and fear for God is really real and it's really inside the heart, is when you feel cold and you feel distant and you feel completely disconnected. You don't feel, and you have this constricted feeling. I don't feel like doing this. That's the true test of whether you have the love for Hashem, whether you're prepared to get up and do it regardless. Because if you're feeling excited about going to shul, you're feeling excited about learning Torah, feel excited about putting on tefillin, feel excited about Shabbos calendar, feel excited. Well, there's no test. There's no test. It's only when you don't feel like doing it, that's when the test comes, and it really shows what do I have really inside of myself. So precisely the name Elokim is used over here as the introduction to the test to Abraham, because apparently it was an atmosphere where there was a sense of constriction around him, and still nonetheless he gets up and he does it. He goes ahead. He understands this is the right thing. This is the performance of truth. This is the action of truth that I have to undertake, and I have to do it. Do I feel like doing it? I don't feel like doing it. Of course not, but I'll do it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway. And that's it relates to what's called, Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, it says, true love, the true love of a person, of another person. Mishnah is talking actually love of two people. There's love which is teluya b'davar, love which is dependent upon something. You know, when you love someone because you're going to get something out of it, then that's easy love. True love is innate, pristine love where it's not dependent upon getting anything out of it. So it's like the love of a parent towards a child. You love the child regardless. So true love between two people, the goal of true love is to be able to get to that true love, that love where it's not it's not dependent upon what he or she is doing for me. It's intrinsic, it's there, it's going to be there by hook or by crook, it's always going to be there. And even if the going gets tough and the feelings get sour and the feelings go low, nonetheless, the love is always intrinsically there. That's true love. Love which is not dependent upon anything. And the same thing applies to Hashem as well. There's love which is dependent upon something and love which is not dependent upon something. I relate to this. I have to tell you something today. I mean, it's all basher because, you know, everything works out. I was learning this, you know, today, last night, and I know this is, you know, I'm got to go home on Sunday. I don't want to go home. I want to stay in Eretz Yisrael, right? And I felt in a bit of a kind of like a down mood because I knew this is my last day to be able to go around over here, like, you know, Shabbos, of course, but, you know, being able to, and I was upset a little bit. And I was thinking to myself, you know, this is it. Like I'm feeling that, you know, that constricted feeling. And, you know, it's easy in those feelings, in those times to kind of like, you know, to be more lax and kind of like, you know, not so kind of enthusiastic, not so revved up. But that's called love dependent. I'm making my love of Hashem dependent upon my being here in Israel. That's love of Hashem has to be regardless whether you're here, you're there, no matter what's going on in your life. Love is consistent. Love is intrinsic. Love is always there. So this is what he was displaying in the state of emotional, spiritual, perhaps occlusion and darkness. Nonetheless, his love is strong, is intense, and he's ready to get up to do what he's supposed to do. That's what a trial is. That's the true trial. And if you read the end of the pasuk says, he tests Abraham. Another thing which jumped out at me in the pasuk, it says, so the verse is, God tested Abraham. And we know the test is go and take your child and sacrifice him. The verse could have right away gone to that sentence. What is the test? And he said, take your child, take your son, your cherished one, your one you love, etc. Before it says that, the verse says, and God said to him, Abraham. And Abraham said back, Hineni. Here I am. A little bit redundant. Why is that necessary? Rashi says on that, he says, Hineni, here I am. Kachi and the Yosam Shaltz Chasim. This is the response of pious people. Lashon Anava, an expression of humility. For Lashon Zimun, an expression of readiness to do that which is called upon me to do. And that says it all. So really those words really sum up the entire trial of Abraham, his passing of the trial. Because it begins, God tested Abraham. God, it was in a state of hardship and darkness and difficulty where things are not easy and so kind of emotionally, resonant and desirable. God tests you. He tests me. And he says, Coleman, are you there? Hineni, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready. I'm not gonna allow my immediate stimuli to drive my behavior, my thoughts, and my words. I'm here for you. I'm ready to do it. That's what a test is. That's what a trial is. So this is, so we should all, be zoch, we should all merit to be able to say to God, to those we love, to all of the responsibilities that we have in our lives, to be able to say hineni, to be able to say, I'm here ready to do that which is incumbent upon me to do. And I'm not going to react to my emotional, physical, or here and now stimuli. I'm ready to take up the challenge to say, hineni, I'm here ready for this.